very pleased to welcome Manjula Lee from Worldwide Generation. Well, we've got Platform G17 Eco, right? It's about data. It's about knowing what's going on out there, and from that building the systems with which to manage it, isn't it?
That's right.
Essentially, that's great. So we can take that. Your platform is monitoring a marketplace technology platform to accelerate the financing and delivery of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement as well. So no doubt you're popular with Antonio Guterres, and it's a very holistic approach that you put forward, certainly from the literature that I've read. Also, Carol Boltmans from Biomass Group, and that's sustainable production of high-value crops for the food market. Most reliable partner. Biological crop protection and pollination is the work that you do. Is that a fair enough assessment? That's great. So we're going to talk to someone who's involved in data and someone who's involved in crops on land about life below water. You may think that's a challenge. However, we have discussed this, and these things do rely on each other for their existence as problems as SDGs and so on. So where do we go, first of all? I think, Manjula, I think it's worth talking about the importance of data, because one thing that's missing from the oceans is data. So, and also regulation, which follows. But tell us a bit about the importance of data to start with.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be on the first gender balance panel. I think women are underrepresented at COP as well, so it's great to be here. So yeah, I'm a technology CEO. I was actually at the inception of the SDGs at the UN when they were being conceived. And the economists that were sitting around the room were saying, how are we going to solve these things? We can't move the goalposts another 15 years. We have to do it. We're at the 21st century generation, and where are we going to start? And that was when I asked them, well, how much do we have to unlock to deliver these goals? And they were saying about 2.5 trillion of extra capital per year. And I said, well, the only way that's going to happen is if the proper capital markets play a role and if the private sector play a role. And the only way they play a role is if there's some kind of return on investment. My first question was, has anyone proven the economic argument of sustainability? They were all like, yeah, good point. No. And so that was actually the birth of Worldwide Generation. I was thinking, how could we prove the economic argument of sustainability? We started doing research, and we started to see that companies that were aligned to sustainability were outperforming on the stock market by 11%. By cleaning up and greening up the supply chain and making them more efficient, they were doing 14 times more revenue. By the millennials and Gen Z were coming into their economic power. They were going to choose brands and leaders that could prove their impact on society and the planet. And this was the big data point. If we are successful in investing this 2.5 trillion and delivering a global resolution to poverty, inequality, and climate change, it would unlock something like 12 trillion global growth per annum, never seen of any generation in human history. And I was like, oh my God, that's the data, like that's the message. Like why isn't anyone telling that message, right? So I get all this data, and I'm like, I go and visit the first sort of stakeholder, the investors. So I go and see BlackRock and UBS and all the money makers, and I say, look at this data. If you invest sustainably, you will pick the next billion, trillion dollar companies. What is stopping you from doing this? And they were like, yeah, no, we know. But right now, sustainability data is coming 12 to 24 months after financial data. Most of the data is data scraped from the public domain, mainly only for public companies. So by the time we get this data set, not only is it for one particular market, but it's out of date, and everyone's monitoring and measuring data impact completely differently. So it's out of date, uncomparable. And another thing, Manjula, if you can solve this for us as well, we get ESG ratings of companies, whether in someone's opinion, this, a company's good, bad, not so good. What we really want to know is if we invest in this company or this project or this solution, are we going to move the dial from here to here, which is really impact data. So if you could just give us trusted, comparable, real-time impact data, we can do our jobs, right? I was like, oh my God, that sounds impossible.
Let's pause there and give Carol a chance to tell us a little bit about Biomass as well. Carol, in terms of the life below, I know you're in the feeding business, but let's lead off there with what you guys do and the relevance of what you've been hearing from Manjula, and also with the life below water thing in the background. What's important things to bear in mind now with sustainable creation of food?
Maybe let me first explain a little bit what we do.
Yeah.
So we produce insects. And so we produce insects that can be used as an alternative to chemical pesticides in greenhouse crops. If you eat a tomato or a pepper or a cucumber, it's grown in a greenhouse, right? And in that greenhouse, the pests are controlled with biological control, with insects that we and some other companies produce. If you get or give a bouquet of roses to somebody, probably produced in Kenya these days, in Kenya they don't spray too many chemicals anymore, they use biological control. So that's what we do, right? And we produce insects on all 6 continents all over the world. Today, in greenhouse crops, almost no pesticides are used anymore to control pests. It's all biological control as part of what we call an IPM program, Integrated Pest Management, where you use a combination of non-chemical techniques to manage pests and diseases. And only as a last resort, if all these techniques don't work, you can help a little bit with a selective chemical pesticide.
Are there dangers with that going a little bit out of control?
No, we are heavily regulated.
Yeah. But in terms of the science, because
Yes.
Importing and exporting different species to different...
So we use native. We
Right.
use native,
Right.
what we call natural enemies, native beneficial insects and mites. We also use what's called biopesticides. So these are biopesticides based on natural substances, can be plant extracts. Our insects can also become sick, right? And so they get fungi, bacteria, viruses that you can cultivate, produce by liquid fermentation or solid state fermentation, and use as a pesticide. They're highly selective. They're harmless for people and animals. And so we look for natural solutions that nature already had to use that in a controlled way. So what does this have to do with life beyond water? Probably I could have sit on the panel also life on land, or on a panel of health or safe food, etc. But let's talk about life beyond water. When pesticides are used in agriculture, there's always runoff. Not a big part of those pesticides end up in the surface water, in rivers, large waterways, and ultimately in the sea. These molecules are designed and developed and produced to kill organisms. And even in low quantities, they accumulate through the food chain, and they can have a big impact on all sorts of organisms. 3 or 4 years ago, a study was published in... Let me go back. Who is older than 50 years old here in the room?
Nobody, I guess.
Yeah, you don't have to admit. I don't know if you remember, but when you were younger, and you would drive a car for 200 kilometers, after 200 kilometers, you would probably have to stop to clean the windows because they were full with insects. How long ago have you done that? You don't do that anymore. No need. And so a German study about 4 years ago showed that over the last 30 years, insect biomass in nature has declined with 75%. 75% less insect biomass in nature. Why is this important? What do insects do? They pollinate, they help to recycle nutrients in nature, they help to spread seed, they are food for other organisms. Why are bird populations declining? Many birds are insectivorous, feed on insects, right? And so the decline of insect biomass started around the early 90s, and this was the same period when a new class of chemical pesticides was launched, called the neonicotinoids, and the first compound was called imidacloprid. And this has a devastating effect in nature, even at low quantities. And the effect doesn't need necessarily to be lethal, but there are also sublethal effects. Yeah. When the fecundity of an organism, be it a fish or an amphibian, etc., goes down with a few percentage, you have a lot of financial people in the room, I think people that know how to calculate, you know about compound effects, right? And so over time, these low sublethal effects, reduced fecundity, behavioral change, problems with mate finding, less resistance against diseases and extreme circumstances of wildlife have a devastating effect. So
is there all the stuff that Karel is talking about there, is there a role for a data crunching platform like yours to be able to harness what we do know, because we don't know very much about the data concerning insects or anything life below water? All those areas are so difficult to monitor. Is there an application for that in what you do?
Yeah, and sort of the conclusion of the story was that, no one could execute, no one could get access to this data set, and no one could measure impact. And one of the things to solve something like life below water or any of the SDGs is to go to causal, systemic, holistic problem solving. And data is what can go to the cause. Like even now in medicine, it's doctors are not treating the symptoms, they're treating the cause. If we talk about climate change is a symptom, it is not a cause. And so we need to go and find the causes of what is causing these impacts to happen. So, for example, life below water. Life below water and what's going on in the dis-ease of what's going on below is actually what's happening as a symptom of what's happening above water, right? And so we need to go and see, well, what are these causation and things like, so we use databot and blockchain technology to be able to collect this data from source with provenance, with evidence in a standardized way, and then you can use machine learning, et cetera, to extrapolate that and actually spin the data out in many directions to say, what is your biggest bang for your buck to get to that, to solving that problem. And taking back water, actually 70% of we as human beings and the earth is water. So if we were going to make the biggest difference, it is actually to solve the water problem, above land and below water. So if we take that further, that we are 70% water, 70% is the earth's is water. Well, we have, for example, a whole proposition to plant 1 trillion trees to take the, capture the carbon. Well, actually, trees don't become useful till they're mature, like adults, right? But actually, below water, things like seagrass and kelp can actually take more carbon out of the air than trees. And so if we're going to solve this at pace, we need to understand where is the biggest bang for our buck. We can't afford to make mistakes. We need the data to be standardized so it's comparable, and we need the data to be impact-driven data, not scores, not sort of one-dimensional, but understanding what are the levers. If you pull this lever, where is that? What the impact of that is going to be. So data-driven decisions.
Where would you like to see progress being made then? What sort of action points would you like to be made out of conclusions like the fact that seagrass or kelp might be more helpful than trees in terms of carbon capture or carbon absorption?
Yeah, so I think, we need, so my belief is that instead of ESG, I call it C, social, economic, and environmental. I really believe that we need to start with us. The data needs to inform us. In every single panel, it was so great to hear education, education, education. Information is light. If we knew that kelp and seagrass, et cetera, actually took more carbon out of the air, well, actually, we would make very different decision-making. We would make different policies. We would incentivize that good behavior. So instead of carbon credits, could we have corporations actually buying kelp farms and seagrass and embedding this into the ocean as a way of offsetting their carbon? So so on the social side, we need to inform ourselves. We need data that's actually trusted and comparable so we can make these decisions, change belief systems, change consumption choices. Then we need an economic system that's compatible with human behavior. We need to reward the good behavior. Right now, we don't really penalize the bad behavior. We don't really reward the good behavior. So companies like yourselves that are doing an amazing job, well, we need to reward that good behavior because we need you to be the front runners to lead the pack, right? And then the final E, which is the environment. My belief is that if we heal ourselves, we heal the planet. And actually that's so true about us as home here, home, family home, city, home, and then the planet as our common home. So I really believe in holistic systems thinking, critical decision making, at the root cause level. And the only way that we can do that is if the data is standardized.
Carol, listening to that, I mean, do you feel that, would you prefer if more people paid attention to the kind of work that you're doing? Do you feel you're operating in a silo, or do you think you're part of a more holistic approach to handling the issues that you deal with?
I do think we are inherently a part of a holistic approach. This crop protection is what I explained. IPM, integrated pest management, is all about systems thinking and a holistic approach. And what we see also is that also in agriculture, data are becoming more and more important. Data-driven growing, use of sensor technology, camera technology, predictive models, detecting pests and diseases in an early stage, precision agriculture where you only apply pesticides where and when they are needed. All this contributes to reducing pesticide usage. And actually it's 3 steps. It's reduce, that's where data can help a lot. Replace, that's what we do. And ultimately redesign our food production systems. And that's all about systems thinking.
What are the building blocks of redesigning our food production business?
Well, I think everything starts with our consumption patterns.
That's right.
Every time you go to the supermarket, Lidl, for example, and you grab a food item from the shelf, you vote for a certain agricultural system. Every time again.
That's right.
And so I think it starts with awareness, with education, with making people aware what the consequences of their actions are. Retailers ask farmers to produce things that consumers want. And so as a consumer, we can change that. We can change agriculture.
So what are the leadership roles here? We're talking about the consumer, or the people who crunch the data on your platform, for example?
I think there's also, we spoke in earlier panels, we spoke about the role of governments, we spoke about the role of companies. I think there's also a role for consumers, there is a big role for NGOs and scientists. I give you an example. In the south of Spain, in Almeria, there is an area, in Spanish they call it El Mar de Plástico, the sea of plastic. If you see it, you can see it from the satellite, 35 to 40,000 hectares of plastic greenhouses. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, eggplants, and so on. These growers, they were spraying the living daylights out of the crop. Massive pest problems. We showed for more than 10 years, during more than 10 years, we showed that it was possible to reduce pesticide usage with more than 90%. We could not convince the growers. Until in 2006, 2007, Greenpeace Germany published a report called Essen ohne Pestiziden, eating without pesticides. Overnight, everything changed. Right? Today, Spanish growers are using almost no chemicals anymore in their greenhouses.
How does that sort of thing happen? How does that sort of thing happen?
Well, this goes back to kind of the data, again, systems thinking. If we say that everything like today and what you've done all of today, every time we wash our hands, every time we wash our hair, every time we, whatever we consume, every time we go to the toilet, every time we do anything, it generally ends up down the sink. What does that end up doing? It goes into our rivers, our lakes, our seas. And actually, so one of the biggest things we can do as leaders is to be really conscious of the consumption, first of all, what is in the supply chain of products. And then even me personally as a CEO, I'm thinking all the time, what am I naturally putting on my face, on my hair, etc., because that is going down that drain. And so we have to be really from source to target, need to be thinking this is going to end up in the ocean. And you were saying who should act? Well, the SDGs call for all of us to act, for government, for business, civil society. We have to act in our strength. We don't have to be, NGOs don't have to be governments don't have to be corporates, right? We all need to do what counts, do what's material to our sector, and we need to be all in an ecosystem together. And that's why we call this platform G17 Eco. Goal 17, Partnership for the Goals. Eco actually means home. And it also forms the trinity of sustainable development, ecology, to learn about our home, economy, to govern and administer and manage our home, and distribute our home, and then ecosystem to manage our home. right?
We're out of time, and I want to thank you both for joining us here. I have to say one thing when you mentioned that, Carol. You know, on a hot summer night when I drive home, I always miss the insects on my windscreen. I wish they were still there. I really do. It always makes me worried when I see that. Thank you both indeed. To our panel, thanks very much indeed.